Hello, Jackie.
Hello.
You're the first one today.
Well, look at that. And I thought I was late. I'm trying to organize oh man, the Wild Horse and Burro Advisory Board is going to be in Reno, giving the BLM some recommendations on how to deal with the wild horse populations in the West. And it's ugly. It's really ugly. And so I've got people coming up that I'm putting up to protest, to go down, to stand for the horses against, hunters and livestock ranchers and the BLM and the rigged board and the rigged system. And it's almost just going to be slaughtered, but whatever.
No,
So I'm trying to do that today, and it's a lot.
that is a lot on your plate.
But I wanted to check in on one of your meetings, so thank you. I'm glad I'm here.
Well, I'm glad you're here too. Hi, Judith. Welcome.
Hi, Josh. Thank you.
Jackie was just telling me she's working on a bunch of stuff to do with the wild horse populations here in the West. We're all in the West, so.
Oh,
wow,
okay.
that's awesome.
Yeah,
That's
we
amazing.
have these wild horses. I mean, they've got a 4 million year legacy in Nevada and the West. I know the current Mustangs were brought in by Spain, but it's still hundreds of years ago. And so
Yeah.
they have a right to be here, but you know how it is with wildlife and people that don't like wildlife and want to kill it. And so I'm organizing a kind of a protest. Yeah.
The thing that people who don't quote unquote like wildlife don't understand is that without wildlife, they don't exist. We don't exist.
Yes, that's what's so
Yeah.
difficult.
And it's not just, oh, okay, if we lose the horses, no big deal, or we lose the sharks, it would destroy the balance of all of it. So if we lose the sharks, which are in danger of extinction, we're in trouble. And how many of us think about sharks? Not too many, but it's true. Or the bees, right? So
Oh my God.
thank you.
There goes the food system.
Thank you for your
Yeah.
work. Much appreciated.
You're welcome. Yeah.
We lived on a horse property back east a couple of years ago, and we had a Mustang that came from the West. And my daughter's a horse girl, so we care about the horses.
That's great.
Yep. And they do so much to keep the land from turning into desert because of their stomachs and their hoofs. They're good gardeners. They're the gardeners of the earth. And so there's so many values. They also prevent wildlife fires. There's so many values to horses, even if you just care about that.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of education to be done. I have to share, went on a trip to southern New Mexico near the Arizona border, and I stayed on a property that was way in the canyons. Like I had to take a dirt track road. Luckily, I had an all-wheel drive, couldn't get there otherwise. And I'm going down this dirt track, and there was a herd of wild horses that blocked my way. And I just had to wait until they were done
So
doing their thing, and they finally moved
special.
along.
Yeah, here in
It was
Arizona,
very exciting.
we've got the Salt River here in Phoenix, and there's a herd of wild horses that live by the river, and people kayak down them. My wife's been kayaking down there, and the wild horses are in the river, and you know
what? That's what they're talking about. It's the Heber wild horses of Arizona is what's on the chopping block next
really?
to it. This is the BLM. This is a national wild horse and burro advisory board that's going to advise the BLM. This is for the whole country, but the focus is on the Heber Arizona horses, the ones in your backyard. So we're bringing press, and I'm trying to get tribal people and people to come to the hearing, give public comment, and stand up for the horses. That's what I'm working on. And I'm putting people up here, and now they want to do documentaries of Tahoe. And so.
Well, that's great.
Wow.
Well, fun stuff. Welcome, Virginia. Good to see you here too.
Can you see me? Because I can't see my picture on the screen. So that's what I was feeling.
No, I'm not seeing your face, but.
Okay, no, I'm here and I don't know how to get out of this. I just hit.
Normally you just hit that video button and it will turn on, but.
Okay, wait a second.
Oh, there we go. Now we see you.
All right, but I can't see you. I mean, but I
Yes,
can't see
yes.
me here, but you can see me. Okay, that's good.
Yeah, we can see you.
I can live with that. I can live with that.
All right. Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for being here today. We might have some others pop on as we go through the hour. Today, before we get into the Q&A stuff, I wanted to talk a little bit about the 7 systems that we're going through over the next few weeks, 7 systems of influence. And today we're talking about the first of the 7 systems of influence, which is vision. And vision in this sense is talking about having an idea in mind of what you want to create. Stephen R. Covey was famous for his saying that all things are created twice. You create everything in your mind first, and then you create it in the real world. And that's certainly the case with books, that we think of a book, we have an idea, and then we do the work that turns that idea into a real printed object that people can read. And with writing a book and having a vision, for some of us, it's easy. We think of a book and we think, you know what, I'm going to write this book. This is my idea. And we get to work and we crank it out and we get it done. Other people say, I know there's some sort of book in me. I'm not sure what it is. I just know that I want to write something. I feel like I should write something, but what is that book? And for those of us who spend a little more time trying to figure out what is the right book to write, one place that we can go to solidify our vision or figure out what that vision is to think about our core identity. And our core identity is made of 2 things. It's our roles and it's our values, or our core roles and our core values. And so the roles we have are the roles that we play in life, whether it's husband, wife, mother, father, son, daughter, friend, entrepreneur. There are all sorts of different roles that we have, and we all have a lot of them. And some of those roles matter more than other roles. And the ones that matter most, we call our core roles. And then we all have core values as well, things that matter to us more than anything else, the things that we value the most in life. And those might be things like love, honesty, or integrity. Let's see, I got to look at my list here. I have my core values written out on a sheet here on the wall. So it's honest, loving, humble, proactive, growing, or growth mindset. So those are some of my values that matter a lot to me. And so when we combine our core roles with our core values, that's where we get our core identity from. That's who we are, is the combination of those core roles and those core values. And when we go to that core identity, then that should inform the book or the books that we write. It should stem out of those things that matter most to us and come from who we are. And so if we look at that, and we can each do this exercise, we can list out all our core roles, we can list out all our core values, and we can play around matching those values up with the different roles to see if we're applying those values to each of the roles that matters most to us. And when we go through that, then we can balance ideas for books against that core identity and say, does this book idea really feed into my core identity, or is it not really connected? And when there's a strong connection between a book idea and our core identity, then we know we're onto something. We're going to have the motivation to see that project through. Whereas if a book idea doesn't really connect with our core identity, maybe we can still see the project through, but it might not go as far as it's going to go as if it's really connected to our core. An example is my LinkedIn book. I wrote a LinkedIn book. It didn't really come from my core identity. It was more something that kind of just happened. Now it's connected to my core identity in other ways. It's practice for doing more books in the future. And it was a book I felt like was valuable, but it wasn't something I was super passionate about, I would say. And so I had other reasons for doing that, but really there are other books that I want to write that are much more tied to my core identity that I really feel deeply about. And that book wasn't one of those books. And so I wrote that book and I got it done, but then I just kind of moved on and left it. It had served its purpose. It was good practice and it's out there and people read it. And sometimes I get notes from people and that's great, but I don't have any motivation to really market the book or push it hard or build a speaking career around it or a business around it because it's not tied to my core identity. Whereas the 7 Systems of Influence itself, I'm working on that book. That's something I care a lot about. That's something I could spend the next 10 or 20 years of my life focusing on, speaking about that, refining it, writing sequels to the book. That's something I care a lot more about, which is part of the reason it's been hard to write that book because I do care so much about it that I keep saying, oh, I'll do that one next. I'll do that one next once I get a little more practice under my belt. So, but that core identity can help us to figure out what the right book is to write and give us a little bit better, more refined vision of what we want to create. So that's a little bit about vision in the 7 Systems of Influence. And then the next systems that we'll go through in subsequent weeks and in the newsletter that I'm sending out. After vision comes Genius Zone, which is what makes you special. Then comes audience, your ideal audience. Then we talk about content. We talk about an action plan. We talk about collaboration. And then finally, we talk about love as the last of the systems of influence. So just wanted to give that little intro today before we go into the Q&A. Anybody have any questions about vision and how it fits in? Yes, Judith?
Yeah, so two things. So first of all, I was very relieved and happy to hear you say that it's harder to write a book that you care about, because that's my experience. I've written other books, no problem. Really, they flowed. I cared and they connected, but this one is kicking my derriere. A. And B, the connection between our core values and our work is literally what got me into what I'm doing now. The recognition that when those two are not in sync or aligned, we can't continue to perform. We don't perform well. We can't sustain it for the long term. Or if we sustain it for the long term, we get depressed or burnt out. That there has to be that alignment and that connection. And if not, then bad things happen. So I love that, just from a different perspective, you're reaffirming, this concept that really we need to identify what matters to us most and live our lives aligned with that in work, in play, or life doesn't feel good. So thank you. Really appreciate that.
Yes, Virginia.
I love this, Josh, because it's exactly where I am with the huge parking lot book that I have filled with all kinds of ideas and things. And what I'm going to do during the second half of today is to go through one of my boxes here with a lot of my journals. And I've decided with this book, because I have a tendency to push into it has to be this way and it has to be right and it has to nonsense. So I decided this time with this book, I'm going to make it fun. I'm going to take it easy and be guided. But I was getting very lost in that. So, so what you just said sort of solidified the core of how you put a lot of those things together. And I think it's why I'm being led to those journals, because those journals were written as I was going through this very difficult process. And they were written no holds barred. So it will be the real thing. And I'm very fond of the real thing, whether it's diamonds or anything, and human behavior is at the top of the list. So thank you.
As we're talking about this, I'm realizing I've been procrastinating something and I couldn't figure out why. I even talked with my wife about it over the week and I said, I've got a major hang up around it's a certain video I've been wanting to make and post to YouTube. And I've been working on this literally for years. And I just never seem to actually pull the trigger and do it. And I was telling her, man, I've got some sort of major hang up about this. And now as we're talking, I realize it's because I care about it so much
Yeah,
that
yeah.
it makes it hard for me to actually sit down and do it, because I'm so afraid of getting it wrong or not doing it at the level I want to do it.
That's
Um,
exactly at the level you want to do it.
yeah. And I started thinking about this too, though, over the weekend. I thought, well, what can I do that's going to make this easier to get it done? What can I do in terms of preparation? And sometimes we use preparation as procrastination, right? But I thought, what can I do to at least move in that direction and make it easier to make the video? And so I started working on a script for it and writing it all out. But now realizing that the real hang up is that I care so much about it that I'm in this perfectionist mode, which I'm not used to. I don't think of myself as a perfectionist. But now that I realize that's the issue, I've got to rethink how to get around that.
Well, I just heard something that might be helpful, because when we focus on the flaws, or we focus on not getting it just right, it holds us back. So if you can focus on the strengths, what the benefits are, why you're doing this, focus there, that might help move it forward.
Yeah.
Or
I'm
there's
in,
the comment, done is better than perfect.
Yes. I tell other people that all the time. I just need to tell it to myself.
Jack Canfield was talking about it the other day in one of his programs, and he said that same thing about somebody just was trying so hard they got burnt out, and then they decided they were just going to relax and let it be and have fun with it. It became a bestseller. And I think, you could, and I belong to another group, A Year of Miracles. And one of the things that they talk, and I've seen it happen like unbelievable. You don't worry about the how. You just do the best you can every day. And we all have miracles in that course happening with that relaxed, or the outcome. You just do your best and it will happen.
Yeah. I love this quote from Winston Churchill about writing a book. You may have heard it before. It's in the workbook. But he said, writing a book is an adventure. To begin with, it is a toy and an amusement. Then it becomes a mistress. Then it becomes a master. Then it becomes a tyrant. The last phase is that just as you are about to be reconciled to your servitude, you kill the monster and fling him to the public.
It's great.
Yeah. That about sums it up.
It does.
All right. Well, let's talk Q&A. How can I help you ladies with your book projects?
Well, you just reminded me, I got pulled away, and you just reminded me of your workbook. So I have to, because I was scheduling, working through that, and then other things. So I'm going to go back to your workbook.
Well, I wrote down these questions you had, and it's either one of your emails or maybe it was in your workbook, and I'm still working on them. For your book, first, why are you doing it? And then the core identity that you just went over. What's the book's vision? And then the ideal audience, the brand tagline, the action plan, the collaborators, and the convert kit. I guess. And I'm also in the queue right now for an interview to do a TEDx talk, which is, how we met through Thought Leader.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the questions they said is, who's your target audience? And it can't be everybody.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking about this because I sort of went to, in earth advocates, environmental educators, but now I'm landing on non-Indigenous people. And it's a little bit of a trick question because
Wow.
The part of it is because, well, Indigenous, the way we use the word now is to classify people that never moved for 10,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
But the real definition of the word has to do with going within Indigenous to a whole prologue of being. And so it really is people that are on the earth breathing, but at the same time, because of the way we've classified and identified and separated ourselves from our own Indigenous sense of seeing ourselves in nature as our true nature, as you saw in my talk, that's where I want to kind of play with that in terms of if you don't see yourself as Indigenous, this is who I'm writing to. So I wanted to ask you, do you think that's too tricky, or is that legitimate, or how does that strike you?
Well, it's still a pretty big group, right? So there is that. It's the trick with non-Indigenous is it's a how do I want to say this? You're saying people who are not this thing rather than people who are this thing. And people don't identify so much as a non-something as they identify as something, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And so, like, if you went out and you said, how many of you are non-Indigenous to an audience, people have to think about that, right? Because nobody's going to say, oh yeah, that's what I call myself all the time. I'm always calling myself non-Indigenous. Nobody does that, right?
I know. I guess
And-
that's my point, is to be provocative, but you're right. That it's like a double negative. It may not work.
Well, I think it can work in some context. I mean, if you're writing the book or you're giving your TEDx talk and you talk about non-Indigenous people and you explain it, I think you can use that within your material.
I will unpack it.
Right. So I think that's fine. But when we're talking about the audience for the talk or the audience for the book, you're not necessarily going to say who the audience is. It's more of a mental thing. You're crafting this book to appeal to a certain audience. Well, how would you appeal to an audience of non-Indigenous people? That's a little bit tough, because it's, well, what defines these non-Indigenous people? They're going to latch on to things you say that target them, but how do you target non-Indigenous people? Because that is kind of everybody else other than Indigenous people, and there aren't necessarily, that's not necessarily a cohesive group, right? And so one of the thought experiments I like to do is I like to think about, if I'm driving down the road and I'm listening to the radio like people used to do, if I'm listening to the radio and I'm tuning through stations and an ad comes on, we tune those ads out in between the songs or whatever we're actually listening to on the radio. And so how can one of those ads break through? One of the ways those ads break through is they identify who they're talking to. They'll say, are you experiencing XYZ problem, or are you part of this group? Are you a,
I know what you're saying. I do know what you're saying.
An
That's
ice cream lover.
they'll call out, right? Are
Yeah.
you an ice cream lover,
Got
or
it.
do you have rough hands, or are your lips chapped,
Yeah.
whatever? They'll call something out and you say, yes, that's me. And all of a sudden you're listening to that ad, and then they can sell you on their product. Well, if the group is non-Indigenous people, how do you call that group out? How do you say,
all right, you're right. Okay, I'm back. Well, I mean, I originally thought travelers, but now I'm speaking to the host on the hosting side. So I thought Airbnb hosts. And then I thought, well, originally I was speaking to destination tourism industry. That's where I started. I wanted to, then I thought, no, I'm really speaking to the US travel, the people that control the travel for the country or the planet. And then I thought, well, actually I'm speaking to the traveler. How can they be a better guest? You know, because the premise of my book is to walk softly, respect wildlife, and share gratitude. And that calls for a connection to nature, which isn't in our cultural story. It's just not. And so, but it is in Indigenous people's cultural story. They don't know how to not be connected to nature because their life depends on the sacredness of that relationship. Ours doesn't. We get water in a bottle and oxygen out of a tank. So we don't think it matters. It's just free Home Depot. So that's why it's gone from, I'm talking to the tourism industry, because I started out, it's about travel. I've designed a framework for how we can create sustainable destinations, but that's morphed into, it's not about trash, it's about hosting. And so that could be Airbnb. And I was at Airbnb, you know, so I've got all sides of it. And I thought, well, no, it's about the traveler. Well, no, it's about everybody breathing that doesn't see that they are the earth. And that's why we have problems we can't solve. And so then I got lost. That's where I'm stuck in my book, in terms of defining and answering that question.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned kind of the title of your book there, It made me think of Ramdas. I don't know how to say his name.
Ramdas.
Ram
Ramdas.
Dass used to live up the street from me.
Did he?
As a child in his LSD days, we were told to stay out of that neighborhood. I was much younger. My mother just told us that house, stay away.
You know, I first read one of his books while I was living in Hong Kong or China, but Asia. And I just kind of assumed that he had already passed away. And then I moved to Boston and then he passed away. And I was like, wait, I was miles away from him. I could have like gone and knocked on his door or something and met him, because I loved his book once I read it. I mean, I thought he was like, you know, I was born in the 70s, so I kind of missed the 60s and all that stuff, you know, so I'm reading this from a historical perspective.
Right.
And all I knew about him was that he looks kind of crazy and people think he's crazy. But then I read his book and I thought, I actually really like this. There's some great stuff in here.
Really an intellectual. Yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
And I
that's
was
amazing.
kind of bummed out when he passed away, and I realized maybe I could have met him or something. That really would have been fun to do.
Wonderful documentary.
Yeah.
You
I
haven't
haven't
seen
watched
it.
that yet, but I'm going to.
Worthwhile.
That was when we couldn't knock on the door in the 60s. I actually lived near him in the 60s. And I was much younger.
Yeah.
So terrorized.
But here's why I brought it up, Jackie, is his foundation is the Love, Serve, Remember Foundation. And his books have titles. I mean, he's got relationships and like, he's kind of targeting everybody, right? I mean, you could say,
I guess seekers, people interested in self-actualization.
yeah, I mean, you could break that down into an audience, but it's kind of like, I mean, seekers is kind of everybody too, right? I mean, you
Right.
could say everybody's
That's what I'm
seeking
saying. Who's
something.
breathing. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's very common for anybody who's advising anybody about books to say, you've got to find your niche, you've got to niche down, you've got to find that specific audience. And I think for most people, that's the right advice. But there are always exceptions to that. If you go to Barnes & Noble and start looking along the bookshelves, you'll find tons of books that are not geared towards anybody. They are geared towards everybody. And a lot of the bestsellers are geared towards everybody. I mean, 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. That's everybody. Peter Attia just came out with this book, Outlive, that's really popular and blowing up. It's a health book. It's for everybody.
Can I interject for a second?
Yep.
A lot of books are for everybody, but they're only going to appeal to certain groups. Like if you care about your health and you want to live long. And I think you mentioned this sustainable traveler, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I think to your point, Josh, there's everybody, but there's the people who care about this thing within everybody. There's everybody who breathes, but a lot of people don't care about what you care about. So
No, that's a good point. It could be the sustainable traveler. I mean, that could fit, because travel, I define travel as when you step outside your door. And the name of my book is actually The Currency of Caring. But the way to
I love it.
open up that currency is that's one of the results, is walking softly to respect wildlife. So I think you're right. That is a good point. I see what you're saying, Josh. And I also appreciate that that clarification, Judith, that you're right. The sustainable traveler might be the subset in everybody, people that however they move on the earth are looking to be more mindful. And that's really, it's a playbook for them. Fair enough. Thank you. Thank you.
And here's what I'm really saying is, you might think of somebody in your head as you're writing the book, and that might help you focus on somebody who's really going to get the most value out of the book. You don't necessarily need to say that anywhere in the book. You don't necessarily need to call that person out. Because 7 Habits, again, 7 Habits, he may have been thinking of very ambitious, successful business people as he was writing the book, but it appeals to everybody and not just that subset. But maybe it helped him to write the book, to think of those people as he was writing the book. But he never says this is only a book for highly ambitious business people or anything.
That is a good point. Maybe I could say the conscious traveler, and then I make it. Okay, but that helps me. That is very helpful. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Can I interject something here?
Mhm.
As I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, have you ever done a mind map? Where you,
No, I know what that is. I could, yeah, that would be a good idea to put pictures of this.
but you do it with circles. You write a word and then you do circles and tangents and it gets you thinking. Because it seems to me that you have a core idea and these people that you talk about in these different groups are spin-off tangents. Because you really got my attention when you started talking about the people that just take the earth for granted because we're losing it. And to me, that's a big part of your core. And then the messages spin out, in other ways. And that really, really hit me. And the stuff you were talking about before was much too general for me. I couldn't connect with it. And especially in this world where we're working with melting all the cultures and everything together, that non-Indigenous just kind of turned me off to be, I hope you don't mind, but
No, I don't mind. No, I appreciate that. So what you're saying, what got your attention is when I was saying the reason, because of the shifts that are happening on the earth, that we could solve these problems better if we were aligned.
And then I can see, so you have that in the middle, there's the circle. Then you have like one arrow and then you make another circle. And I can think about the young people are wild about this. They should be, and they're furious because we're killing an earth that they're going to have for their future. And you just keep spinning and all these different thoughts come out. And then out of that mind map comes a lot of information from inside of you. They've helped me a lot. I don't know.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. And that's where I put the why for Josh's questions. I put the planetary shift needs more awareness of what, so maybe that is, it needs, we don't recognize ourselves as cells on the earth, that we are part of the earth's conscious development, not.
And we don't recognize this, that our behavior, that throwing things around and lighting matches and smoking cigarettes and stuff in the forest and all of that, that's just a huge thing.
And you're right, it is the future. The future is going to be crushed without.
The kids are furious about it, and well deserved.
Thank you.
Great. Jackie, did you have more questions?
No, I
You
just
said you had a list.
well, I was your list, like the
Okay.
the list of why do the book, and that's I felt like I thought the planetary shift needs awareness, and then the core identity, which I felt you were talking about just because you recently brought that up again, is for me, I see myself as a change agent and a nature advocate to increase consciousness in community. So I think I got that one. And then the vision is a framework to inspire this movement of awareness that our true nature is nature. And then the ideal audience I was stuck on. And then the tagline is the walk softly, respect wildlife, our true nature is nature. And then my action plan, well, I'm already writing the book. I have the chapters, so I wasn't sure, but the collaborators, I wasn't sure either. And the convert kit, I guess those three, I'm not. The collaborators and the convert kit and the action plan is the 7 steps. Is that the action plan that you're prescribing?
No, the action plan is, well, in the simplest form, the action plan is whatever your action plan is. It's
Okay,
just,
so I'm
the
already
point is-
writing the book, and yeah.
Right. The point is that you have a plan rather
Okay.
than just saying, I'm going to write a book someday. Well,
Oh
when
no,
are you
I've
going to
already
write?
got chapters and I'm halfway there.
Yeah. So the important thing is that you have some sort of plan, whatever plan works for you. The convert kit part, that's just a minor technical thing. That's just, it's easier to sell a book. It's easier to get a book out there and spread it if you have an email list. It's the #1 marketing platform that you have, is having a good email list.
I
And
see. That's
so-
what a convert kit is. I see.
Yeah, so ConvertKit is software to manage an email list, to get people signed up, to start building that list. And so that's all that's talking about. Now, if you have an audience somewhere else, if there's other ways that you can distribute your book, that's great, but it's always great to be collecting emails, because social media and everything else, you
It's
can
not so
lose
much.
that.
I agree. Emails is the best.
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, that's how I got so many views on my talk, is I just sent it out directly to people through text and email, and I'm over 900 views now. So
Mhm,
that was
that's
way
great.
better. I put it on social media. I didn't get anything. And even when
Right.
Taylor at Thought Leader pushed it out, nothing really.
Yeah, yeah.
He had
Email.
What's your
10,000.
TED Talk? I would
It's-
love to see it.
It's not it's Thought Leader showcased me. It's on
Oh,
it's a thought leader talk called The Currency of Caring. The
Oh.
currency
Is
of
it on YouTube though?
the currency of the currency God, the
The currency of caring?
caring, and it is on YouTube. I'll put a link in the chat if you'd like.
Sure.
Great.
That'd be great.
We
Love
all
it.
like it.
Okay, I found it.
Oh, you found it already. Look how fast you are.
Yep. I'll see if I can beat you to it. There. We got it at the same time.
Thank you.
Rock,
Yeah,
paper, scissors.
that's funny. Wonder why mine is longer. But anyway, yeah, so that was a 7-minute, we were given 7 minutes. I went a little over, but
Mhm.
it was, my first, it's sort of
Love
now
it.
part of my resume piece. And if I get this TEDx stage, which is also up by Seattle, then it would be great if I had the book, because it certainly would tie in to the talk about, that.
Yes. Well, let's talk about that last piece, collaboration, real quick.
Yes.
And we just had Jim Wagner pop on and then he popped off real quick. Well, maybe Jim will come back. So collaboration is all about connecting with other people who have similar interests or audiences, somebody that we can work with, and we both end up winning as a result of it. With the point being that we get to spread our content or our book further and wider and connect more with our ideal audience. You're doing this by doing a TEDx talk. If you have your book and then you go to a TEDx talk, you're collaborating with the organizers of that TEDx event. They have an audience that you want. And so by them sharing that audience with you, they benefit because their audience enjoys the TEDx event. You benefit because you get a new audience who now is exposed to your thoughts and might get your book and be influenced by your book to do whatever it is that you want them to do. So that's one example of collaboration, but there are a million different ways that you can collaborate with other people. For example, you could go out and find 10 other people like yourself who are involved in similar things, but have different audiences, but audiences that, when I say different audiences, they might have different specific people, but maybe you share the same type of person as your audience. So let's say you've got 500 people on your email list and somebody else has a different 500 people on their email list, but they're all the same type of people. And what is interested in that person, or the people that that person has on their list, they're interested in their content, but they'd also be interested in yours and vice versa with yours. Well, if you can get together and do an event or create a video together or a social media post or write an article or something, then you get their audience and they get your audience. And now both of you have 1,000 people on your email list. Whereas before you just had 500, and everybody wins. Nobody loses anything. Everybody benefits because both of you have grown your audience, and the audience is happy because now they have access to other information they didn't know existed before.
So it's the high tide rises all boats.
Right. So there are so many ways to collaborate. The key really is to be looking for those collaboration opportunities, because we could go through all sorts of ideas and that might spark something, but you're going to come across opportunities in your life that are just specific to the situation. And you're going to have to be in tune looking for those opportunities so that when it comes up, you recognize it and you say, hey, this is one of those moments where I can help this person and they can help me and we both win, and we're going to grow our audiences through this. And this is going to help me get my book out in front of more people and make a bigger difference.
Okay.
So that's collaboration in a nutshell.
Yeah, I'm actually working on 3 books, and I'm thinking the other 2 are very small books, a little pocket book for travelers, actually called The 8 Worlds of Wonder, to help guide them on how to really think about the 8 layers that make up every destination, every place, and then make it kind of a poetic fun book. So that might be faster to get done, to take to the talk, come to think of it. And then the third one is, this was a suggestion, a children's book, because I'm getting all these songs from the earth and I'm playing them with at kids' places and stuff, and they're loving it. So someone said, why don't I make a little book called The Nature in Me to help young children, because they're so much more responsive to seeing the nature. They're already talking to trees. They already have relationships with bugs and the native wildlife around them. So I'm thinking of that too. That might be a little bit faster. And, you know, you've got me thinking about the collaboration and how with schools and educators and people looking at conscious relationship. And yes. Okay. Thank you. I think that's all my questions.
Judith, did you want to say something?
I want the book about the 8.
Oh, the 8 worlds of wonder. Okay, cool.
Yes, I would like that book. So if you would please write it.
Yes, I've got it. It's already storyboarded. I've got an illustrator on it, and it's mostly a lot of illustrations and Thank
I
you.
said, oh, good. No,
Yes, and it's just going to be a little, fits in your pocket. You take it wherever you go in the world. I want to make it free to hotels to put it in their hotel rooms. So I'm looking for collaborators to help print it, and they could maybe put the advertisement they want in the back or something.
I think
So
you should
that-
make hotels pay for it to put it in their rooms.
Yeah, maybe you're right. I give away so much for free. All right. I'm
When
gonna
we
put that down.
care about something so deeply, we just want to give it to the world.
Yeah,
But
Charge the hotels.
sometimes there needs to be an exchange to bring it value, that for them to understand the value it brings. So they have this. Yeah.
You can give them a bulk discount.
thank you.
Or have a foundation or something that money goes to, the money from that book goes to, and charge them.
I do have a foundation. I am the executive director of sustaintahoe.org, and that is,
Oh,
I'm working on behalf of that. I'm a volunteer executive director. So, so you're right. That would help our organization. We're all,
Well, it would help the organization, but one theme, and this is my PR here that you're getting here. One theme that consistently seems to be coming here is, and it's huge, is that like you said about the children, it's them. They already have a relationship with the earth, which they do with, you know, everything, and everything's magical to them. But that seems to be the core that I hear here of how an individual can keep and make this a better earth. And then you get more specific with all these different groups. But that seems to be a real core message here, that and what was it that you said about? I wrote something down here that really hit me. True nature is nature. In
yeah,
other words, it's our innate nature as exhibited by the children to be in awe, to admire, to take care of those things, and we've lost that as we go older. So I love that true nature is nature. It's a real core, like in the middle of this mind map, and then you just take it off to these different groups and keep it as because that's the basic thing you seem to be trying to get people to do here, is to care about their surroundings and nature, or it's going to disappear. And
yes, that is it. As a matter of fact, I'll put this in the link just for fun. It's an unlisted video that I just shared because I don't have permission from the kids' parents yet. But I just shared one of the songs that came to me with the earth at a little summer class, and the kids really liked it, and they got into it. It's called The Nature in Me. And so I'm seeing it. I didn't see this in the vision, and now I'm seeing maybe this is a stronger way to go. So I am, you know, still finding my way in the dark. I've spent a lot of time trying to influence the tourism industry, and that has just been nothing but insane pain. And so I'm backing away from that industry because they can't move. They're too entrenched. They can't move.
you just hit it. The nature in me, everybody has it.
Yes.
And as they develop and they do, that's a huge nugget. And then these different groups spin out of it. I do the mind map and put the nature.
Okay, I'll do it in The Nature in Me in the beginning, then I'll put that in the center. That's
Yeah,
great.
and
Wow, thank you.
And then let it no, this is brainstorming, which is what
I appreciate it. Yes.
Yes. and the most fun things come out of it. But that's the small children are the illustration. And even I bet if I looked at them singing that song or whatever, it's sheer joy. And
It was so much fun. Yes, it's joy, and they're the future.
and how we get, and even some of this is how that changes as we grow, the forces in our life that make us not listen to that anymore. And someone tells you in 10th grade that you can't write or punctuate or do something, and you think you're stupid, you never write again, that kind of stuff. That, I mean, something dissipates in our, as we grow up
You're right. The cultural story comes in. The cultural, the whole way, the indoctrination of disconnect, because there's much more profit made when we don't see our true nature in nature. We're not grounded, so we're very easy to be manipulated.
And this to me is a huge issue for people about getting in touch with their natural values, their natural stuff, which is really going to make them not throw gum wrappers or throw cigarette butts or all
Exactly. That's exactly. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. That's exactly why I think we don't get environmental justice, because when people aren't connected, they don't care. And if they don't care, then it's easier to trash something.
Well,
And
they also haven't had the guides in their lives, like
they don't have that. Yeah.
Around and said, step aside, think of someone else, or take one piece at the party and till everyone is served. That I was writing a book about putting the human back into humanity to increase empathy and decrease violence. So I've done a lot about this. It's similar. It's similar.
You know, what's interesting is the root word for human is humus, which is mud, compost. And it's like, you think we breathe, we drink, we eat from the earth. How are we not the earth? How did we believe that we were so not the earth when without oxygen, water, and food, which all comes from mud, how are we not mud? And it's even an interfaith, because one of the TEDx applications asked me for a proverb, and I thought, what's that? So I thought it must be a Bible thing. So I went and I looked, sure enough, an interfaith priest or whatever he is article said that humans are humus, they are of the earth, they are of the earth. It's right there. How did religion do such a good job of disconnecting us when it's right there that we are the earth, we are the mud, the cell of the continent? So it shouldn't be such a hard walk back to a basic understanding that would change the way we think, and therefore the solutions we come up with would be more sustainable and serve everybody, like the high tide. But somehow the profit first story has been that's the currency nature doesn't run on. Nature runs on relationship, the currency of all living systems. That's the currency of caring that we really can't live without, but we forgot. We think we can't live without money, but we can't live without caring, and neither can nature. And there we are. So that's
another thing that came out of it is the power of the smartphone and the internet. If I tell you I'm sorry face to face, I can see how much I've hurt you for something. If I just click sorry or something,
emoji.
The emotions and things, there's a lot. I could give you names of books that's been written on this by some very serious people, because it is changing.
It's changing us.
Well, we are losing our ability to empathize. We are losing, and they think of everything as an algorithm. If I do these things, I'm going to get this reaction from this person, not doing those things because I care about the person or I want to help the person. Okay, I'll shut up.
No, that's really relevant, actually.
That's very relevant.
Yeah, I did a talk for a group of lawyers, and I was asked a question. I asked a question about how they feel about a photo I hadn't shown, and there was a judge she could not connect with a feeling. All the words she used were intellectual. And I kept trying to just move her closer to what a feeling is.
What?
And I come across a lot of people like that. So there is a need for this on every level.
There's a woman's name, I think, is Sherry Turkle, and she's a behavioral scientist at MIT. So you can imagine what a job that is in terms of, dealing with all these things. She's written a couple of books, which I'm happy to send them if you're interested, the titles and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sherry Turkle at MIT.
Sherry Turkle.
Terkle.
Got the books right over here. Hang on for a minute.
Put it in the chat.
And, circling back to Ram Dass,
Mhm.
who wrote Be Here Now. I don't know if that's the book you were talking about, but that came out in the 60s or the early 70s.
Yeah.
After his entire, being at Harvard, doing all of the, psychedelic research, when now they're going back to it. A lot of universities are going back to using psychedelics.
Yeah, they are. It's
I live
legitimized.
I live in Boston, so I know a lot about those communities. Okay,
Yeah.
one, all right, and I'll put it in the chat. It's Howard Gardner and Katie Davis. We're the originators. Howard Gardner is a legendary educator at Harvard.
Yeah.
And the book is called The App Generation: How Today's Youth Navigate Identity, Intimacy, and Imagination in a Digital World. All right, so I'll put that out there. I'll put this on the chat in a minute. And then the other one is Reclaiming Conversation: The Power of Talk in a Digital Age. And then she has another, Sherry Turkle, SherryTurkle. And then it's author of Alone Together. So she has another book, Alone Together. I'll put these in the chat. And I'll give you my
I've
email
heard of these.
in case you need it. But and then there was another book, The Lonely Generation, I believe, that talks about here's where we're headed, that people rent people for a hug or a cuddle, no sex involved, that people have gotten so they don't know how to relate to people and just have someone come for a cup of coffee and that stuff.
Yeah.
Right, so reclaiming. All right, Gardner, the
Us
afternoon.
to rent people. I think the pandemic didn't help that part.
And we are the loneliest, country. The App Generation.
I believe it.
Anyway, watch his documentary. I think you'll really appreciate it. And I'm sorry you didn't get to meet him. It would have been probably pretty amazing to be in his presence.
Yeah, I think a lot about the idea that human progress is not all progress. And I often wonder if, I'm very grateful for antibiotics and especially air conditioning living in Arizona right now. There are a lot of things that I'm grateful for, and I don't want to go back and live the way that we lived 200 years ago in every single way.
Right.
But when I look at the way that society was organized and families and a simpler life,
Yes.
that wasn't driven by so much. They were driven by survival. And there was a certain amount of materialism that crept in because materialism grew out of this need to accumulate wealth in order to survive. Well, we don't have that today. We don't have that drive of, gee, I need to accumulate because otherwise I might not survive. Some of us do, some of us don't.
Right.
Some of us are very privileged in that we don't feel like anything bad's going to happen to us in terms of material possessions. We have everything we need. But I look at, whenever I study history and I look at the way people lived 200 years ago, 300 years ago, I feel like we've really lost something in terms of society and relationships and the community. And when I lived in China, I felt like I saw part of that. You go to a park in China at 10 p.m. on a Friday night, it is full of people dancing, playing music, playing badminton.
Wow.
Every single Friday night, if not every single night. And it's this community thing. You go to a park in the US at 10 p.m., you're not finding anything good in the
No.
US. But in China, it was just like this experience, or in China, we'd walk down an alleyway at 10 p.m. at night, and their families sitting out there talking to each other, their kids playing in the alleyway. And there's this whole communal thing every single night. And I thought,
Wow.
oh, this is so great. I love
Gosh,
this.
that's
I wish I could
amazing.
understand what everybody was saying. And I wish I could talk with them, but I just saw this community that we don't have here. Here, I drive into my garage, I shut the garage door, I don't see my neighbors. I might talk to one of my neighbors once every other week or something, but nobody's outside, nobody's out front to just talk to, but in China, they still had that, at least pre-COVID. And I feel like we're missing out on so much as a result of our modern society. But it kind of feels sometimes like either you get it all or you get nothing of it. And if you talk to people about this, sometimes they say, well, you want to go live like we did 200 years ago when everybody was dying of disease. No, I don't want that part of it, but I want some of the other parts of it.
What you're saying is right, spot on, because, you know, those two guys at Harvard, or there's that longitudinal study about how relationships are really what keep us healthy, key to happiness, live long, health. It's all about the relationships. And I bet when you were walking down that alley in China, you could feel, even though you didn't understand the words, you could feel them. You could feel the energy of the closeness, the flow. Like you would know if it was welcome or unwelcome. And clearly there was a welcome vibe that you experienced.
Yeah, it was so friendly.
Human. Yeah.
Even though I didn't know these people and I'm a foreigner, it was just friendly.
Yeah.
And it felt like a home. It felt like a community. And I felt like I maybe got a little taste of that on my street growing up as a kid, but no. And the reason I brought this up with Ram Dass is I felt like reading about his journey. It's kind of like he had that realization that all this stuff that he had done and accumulated in terms of knowledge and being a professor at Harvard, and then he just walked away from it.
Mhm.
And yet he's like the happiest man in the world. And you look at that and you say, here's a guy who realized everything I've got is not what brings happiness. This happiness is over here. And he was willing to just drop it all and go after the thing that he saw was true happiness. And I was so impressed by that. I mean, how many of us could just drop everything that we've worked so hard for and say, I'm going to go live this completely different life and then be happy with it. But he never seemed to look back.
There was a whole group of that at that time. I'm 75. I don't know how old everybody else is. And that concept of be here now and some of the other things that you were talking about were then transformed. There was a big transformational program, EST. I don't know if you all knew about it, that started in the 80s with Werner Erhard, and they used to go to Esalen in California.
Oh, Esalen, yeah.
And I mean, it was quite a place. And I was never there, but I was close to it in the Big Sur with someone that I was a man who wrote How to Get Control of Your Time in Your Life, Alan Lake. And I don't know if you ever heard of him, but I got to go to his estate on the Big Sur, which was right down the street from that. But the point was, all this stuff that you're talking about was what a lot of these Harvard types and people did. And one of the reasons they were blowing their brains out with LSD and all the rest of it is that they were looking for the visionary and all that other kind of stuff. And there was just a lot of people like that in the Boston area at that time. Well, even after that, my husband was one of those types. He drank, he didn't do the drugs. But he said, had they been around when he was young, we would have been into them. But he was a visionary and never forgot. This is what's happening where he came from. And he used to send money to the Indians, and he used to, we saw Christmas cards from people, and I'd say he put a couple of convicts through college because they wrote to him. And none of it was ever discussed. So there were a lot of those kinds of leaders, and that's what we're losing in the world today. But what I was doing my writing about, because I really believe in it, from a tragic violent experience I had in my own life, and I have careers in education and public relations, and then writing and speaking and all that stuff. But the educator in me really couldn't stand having these small children not be able to go to school for fear of being shot. It just drives me out of my mind. So that's how I got, and those are the collection of books that gave me a tremendous amount of information. So I hope that you enjoy them. And a lot of it is the change in roles in families with women working because they're not home, whether we even realize that the value of what we were doing, that thing about, it was the mothers taught children empathy, and they were there with cookies and milk in the afternoon to talk about how was your day, and some skills for dealing with the big kid, the bully, or the big kid to help the child instead of pull out a gun. That's what we're missing. And then this other stuff that I was talking about. And in this book, The Lonely Century, How to Restore Connection in a World That's Pulling Apart, it will just blow your mind with what the future is about. Renting a friend. This person is making, I was thinking I ought to do that. I mean, I can be tremendous amount of fun, and I know all kinds of things did for people that can't enjoy themselves and stuff, but renting a friend, and this is a business. So that's what I see as the big tragedy. And my biggest, you could probably hear it in my voice, this thing with the violence in the United States of America. Give me a break. It's just, I can't deal with it. Well, and that was my way of dealing with it. So you're in a it's about caring. And the thing that really made sense to me was that business about in Sherry Turkle's book, and Howard Gardner, who is, I say, he's the founder of education practically, of what is happening by dealing with apps. And they begin to think of the world and communication as an app. And A Night in America used to be what you're talking about, Josh, that you had Little League games, and you had Boy Scouts, and you had Girl Scouts, and you had all these different kinds of places. And then you'd have a community, there'd be a men's group and a women's group, and they'd have events in the park where all families and all children and everyone came together. That was America. Yeah. And concerts and all that kind of stuff. And
Well, I think that as what Judith said is relationship is the currency of all living systems. And that's how nature's put together. That's how we're put together. So that's why when you go to China and you see these types of communities, you can see them more in other countries than in America. And I think a lot of it is because of the way the neighborhoods and the cities are set up. We used to be set up in circles. We used to be set up around. I mean, where I started in the Midwest, there was always a little, park in the center, and then the city went out. But then we went into this linear thing. But to Josh's point also, we can have that sense of community, because at the core, relationship is our currency that we can't live without. And so we can have it without going back to some caveman vision. It's not like we have to give up what we have to think about it differently. And one of the people I look to in the world that's been really inspiring to me is Mitchell Joachim, who's an MIT architect. And I'll send you the link. This is so fun. Just an example of how this is a 2,500-year-old bleaching techniques. That's not the right word, but anyway, it's how to grow your own home. So you can grow your own home. So you're using a 3,000-year-old technique with ficus plants, how you can create an exoskeleton, and the more you grow, they suck carbon. So neighborhoods become, climate givers. They help us manage climate change. And yet you use all the modern stuff for scaffolding, which is all built from today's technology. So we can get to where we have people out celebrating and being together at 10 at night in our parks. And we can also have air conditioning, and we cannot screw up the place when we do see that our true nature as a part of nature is to think with nature. And those are where the sustainable solutions come from, like regenerative agriculture, biomimicking, all the things that are the super cool things always come from thinking with nature, because it never fails to do things that would be in the best interest of the high tide rises all boats. So it seems like it's the answer hiding in plain sight for generations, and it's sitting there, like I say, recycled fashion, ready for today's runway. It's just from here to here because it's in us already. It's just, how do we bring that best barn raising American side of ourselves back up? It's in there. And so that's what my hope is with what I'm doing. And I guess all of you too, because it sounds like your books are along the same line, inspiring evolution.
Like what you said about barn raising. It's true. We showed up, everybody showed up for each other.
Everybody did. Yeah. And I mean, I've created communities in my neighborhoods. I've done things. I've pulled our, 70 homes in my neighborhood here together to do a fire awareness, did a big street party and games and stuff. It's a lot of work, and a lot of people were really resistant. But I said, if we all do it's called, fuels. So I live in Lake Tahoe and we have a
Yeah.
lot of fire issues. So it's about fuels management. So they were asking neighborhoods. I became an ambassador and then I went door to door, got all the neighbors. Let's come together and do our defensible space together collectively. It'll be cheaper and we'll all do it together. And then we'll have this party and celebrate, blah, 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 like that. So it was fun to see that can happen. It was also interesting to see how many people were like, well, I don't know if I want to go out of my house. It's like, oh my God, you know. So it's not an easy push, but I mean, here it is summer, get a block party. You know, it's
Well, we have fun in this group, don't we?
thank you,
do,
Josh.
we do. And we have a
Oh,
great,
we're already done. Oh, shoot.
we have
Okay.
we have a great leader, seriously.
Thank you, Josh.
has so many
Definitely.
influence in so many areas. It blows my mind at his age. I don't mean to sound like an old fart, but it just it amazes me with the technology. We mention a thing, you saw it 2 seconds later, he's got it on the computer. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, you are fast.
Well, thank you all for being here today. So now we're going into our work together part. Jackie, you haven't been here for this before, but after we do the Q&A, we just hang out those who want to, and we just work on our books. So we just mute Zoom and work on whatever we've got to work on. And if anybody has anything they want to ask about or something they want to say, they can unmute and say it. But we just go until the hour just working on our books. It's just one way to help each other be accountable. So
Oh,
nobody's
I see.
obligated
That's
to stay
good.
for
Yeah.
that. But if you want to stay and get work done on your book, then you're more than welcome to.
Yeah, that is a good idea. Oh my gosh. So, okay, where is my book?
If you have questions, what I love about it is I'll be working away and something will happen and I can, Josh is right there and he can unmute and answer my question. I mean, it's golden.
Okay. All right. I'm in. I'm gonna find.
All right. Before we go into that, does anybody have any last questions or comments or anything they want to say before we all go on mute? No? All good? All right. Well, I'm going to mute. I'll stay right here. And if anybody has anything they want to say, they can say it. But otherwise,
Thank
we'll
you
go
all. I'm going to mute too. I'm going to mute too.
on. All right.
I have seen it many times. Good night.
All right. Thanks,
Nice
Virginia.
Nice meeting you all.
You too. Jackie, unless you have any last questions, I think we'll wrap it up here. Jackie, did you have anything else you wanted to talk about?
No, that's good. I jumped into a chapter I'd been avoiding. So
That's what this is good for.
yeah,
This is
I
what-
appreciate it.
That's what I do during this time as well. I get into the stuff that I'm procrastinating on, and then it just helps to have a group to work with. So
Yeah, it does. It's like the apathon at Thought Leader, you know, the apathons where you go in and then you all apply at once. So I'm up to 30 applications and I do have an interview coming up. So
great.
we'll see. Thank you so much, Josh. I appreciate it. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.